Welcome back. Now, with the total cost of the national dialogue still unclear and a major point of contention, Parliament's Appropriations Committee plans to query the expenditure. Chairperson Mmusi Maimane said he was concerned about how the national dialogue would be funded and implemented. Over the weekend, the presidency said the full budget was yet to be determined and would depend on donations and other free services. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome Mmusi Maimane himself. Mmusi, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I think, Mmusi, it is quite unprecedented, isn't it, that when you have a public gathering like the National Dialogue, one would assume that the amounts would be predetermined at that moment. This seems to be quite different, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what's more worrying is the fact that this was previously agreed to. The National Dialogue is not something that is an emergency. So in other words, we shouldn't be discussing emergency funding for it. We shouldn't not know what the full budget is. And given the fact that it was first touted a number of years ago, which over 400 days ago, I can remember we were also part of those who called for one. It is clear that government failed to be able to do the adequate preparation to table a budget that's fundable. Secondly, if you are going to appropriate money or draw money from the National Revenue Fund, it has to be done so by an act of parliament. Now, that act is the Appropriations Act, which was voted upon a number of weeks ago, which nowhere there did it mention the specific item called the National Dialogue. And so if it comes from either the Department of Labour, as it's going to be funded with NEDLEC, or it's going to be out of the presidency vote, South Africans need to know. They need to know how much, they need to know upfront, and they need to be able to know which programs are being stopped in order to fund the National Dialogue, because we've agreed that the budget is 2.1 trillion rand. And so as 2.1 trillion rand, it's now common cause that in the light of that, we cannot then move away from that item. So there's no additional funding. It means money has to be taken from something that existed to fund this dialogue. Government doesn't have petty cash. It doesn't have a box on the side that it says it can pull 400 million or 500 million or whatever the figure is. That, as a public representative, we still don't know what the absolute figure is quite disturbing, given that citizens only are represented in parliament. They're not represented in cabinet or lahotla or in a newspaper, nowhere. Just, or not even at the dialogue. They are represented in parliament. So we need to know.
Yeah, Mmusi, I mean, it comes at a time where, I mean, just today we saw the unemployment rate going up. We have a fiscus which is quite strained at this moment. And here again lies the problem, is that we have this dialogue where the presidency is also saying, well, there's also going to be donations that will be coming from it. This seems to be quite a mixed up sort of planning ahead of this national dialogue, even though on paper it looks all and well to have citizen participation, but it is the money at the end of the day that does matter.
No, completely. And that there must be a combination of funding between public and private is a welcome initiative. But what I would urge, and that still remains key concern for us as South Africans, is that if it is exclusively government-led, government-funded, state president programmed, then you are going to have the absolute dilemma of citizens feeling like they're being told about their country rather than contributing. Just because the state has money, it doesn't mean this is the state's money, it's the people's money. Now the people are asking, they want to convene themselves to talk. You must be able to facilitate that. And the president is the head of state in that regard, is allowed to convene the idea of national unity. But it cannot be dictated to as the head of a political party or a political program or even a GNU program. It must come back to the point that, quite deliberately, where we say to ourselves, it must go back to where the people know, and even on the procurement and the PFMA component, let there be transparency. I think the dialogue could benefit from that in showing people that it is their process, it will cost them this much, and the people can concede that this is how much they're going to spend on a particular process.
Mmusi, another point of concern, and a number of citizens have raised it, civil society has also raised it, is that the procurement with regards to this actual national dialogue. And I'm sure you, sitting as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, may also want answers on this. the last thing South Africa needs is, when this is all and done and all completed, that we are now finding out that this was appropriated in the wrong means. Is there a concern from your part as the chairperson of this Standing Committee on Appropriations that we may find a possibility on this happening, given that we've seen so many initiatives from government before, and there's always been a sort of loophole with regards to this?
Yeah, and that's why the argument says cannot be urgent. Because often people use what is typically called deviations when you circumvent the Public Finance Management Act provisions by saying it's an emergency. And therefore you need to procure quickly. You need to get a venue quickly. You need to do all of these things quickly. I would still maintain it cannot be a matter of public procurement on an urgent basis. It must be public procurement that is planned for, deliberated on, that the requisite legislation is put on the table so as to avoid even intentional circumventing, and worse, when sometimes when it comes to venues that are going to be used all across the country, that you find out with a free-for-all where people feel they can circumvent PFMA, deal with urgency, and then the funds are never get used. I want to affirm this point. The national dialogue is important.
Yes.
The crisis in our country is the economy, as you've alluded to. It is important for citizens to own the process. But what's important is in doing all of that, never throw your laws out because you'll never be able to recover the process from there. So as an appropriations committee, it's why I want transparency. It's why I want Treasury to come and explain. And so that it's not also post facto that we were told today, speculatively, we don't know what the figure is. Is it 400? Is it 500 million? And then we wake up a year later and we're down 800 million. And then the fiscus is then obligated to refund that money, whereas it didn't pre-agree to it.
Another point of concern, Mmusi, and I'm sure you've seen it also, is the legacy foundations, who of course have withdrawn from this weekend's national convention. Look, they have said that we are still fully committed to a dialogue, but what they're concerned about is the funding mechanism with regards to that. And I just wanted to get your take on the legacy foundations and what they have said, because they have been quite influential in really calling for this national dialogue and being part of it.
I think there can be no debate the national foundations need to be engaged. I've written to the presidency to request that they go see the national legacy foundations so that they can be brought on. President Mbeki was one of the ones who called for the national dialogue, and many others. So if we really want the authenticity about this, we need to get all role players on the table. If the debate is about the launch over this weekend, well, let's be clear that we need, even, for example, one of the key problems I'm facing at the moment is that there've been no documentation that tells us what are the people going to talk about. It's not, this is a national dialogue, not a national brainstorming. So therefore, it's important that the documents are put forward so that people know what they're going to give input into and what sectors then become important, and what additional points they want to bring. Otherwise, you run the risk of turning what could be a dialogue into a national brainstorm, in which instance you'd get nowhere.
Mmusi, just to close off, because I know that you are very busy at the moment, what is it from your role, of course, as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, are you requesting from Parliament, from the Speaker, with regards to the clarity and the understanding with regards to this national dialogue from a fiscal perspective?
To quote a very famous movie, show us the money.
Yeah.
Show us where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Show us what programs you've stopped. What programs, how will you fund this national dialogue? Because it's just this weekend is just but the start. There are multiple events coming through. What is the sustainability? And more than anything, if there are environments, which the deviation of funds that exceed 8%, Parliament is the only place where you can approve of those funds. It stops anyone from being able to approve a budget and then spend differently. And therefore, I'm asked National Treasury, the Minister of Finance, and then as it comes to the presidency, give us assurances that this is civil society-led, that the people will be engaged, that it will find solutions that are workable, and that ultimately, when it comes from that, it will always ensure that it is funded properly, but also operates to achieve the mandate of what the dialogue was set up to do.
Okay, it's Mmusi Maimane quoting Jerry Maguire there. Mmusi, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Much appreciated.
That's Mmusi Maimane, of course, not only the leader of Build One South Africa, but also he serves as the chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Appropriations. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. If you've missed this episode, you will be able to find it, all the interviews, on our YouTube channel. Tomorrow, we are back with a talking point from myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.